Are you a new dungeon master who wants to introduce Dungeons and Dragons to your friends? Or maybe you're an experienced dungeon master who just needs a quick one-shot for some sort of special event. Well, this video is just right for you. I'm Brad Wolf, and welcome to DireDen. And I'm going to show you how to run a one-shot. I'm going to give you a simple flowchart that helps establish a structure to make running a one-shot extremely simple. And this is fantastic if you're running for new players or young kids. This is a great way to get started. And like I said, you probably already have this adventure if you own the new Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. Because this adventure is called the Foul Stream, and it's already there in the DMG waiting for you to run it. When running low-level D&D or some other similar game like Shadowdark, your combat encounters are going to take at least 30 minutes. If you're running high-level D&D, they can take up to an hour. So I usually stick to low-level D&D when I'm running one-shots. With your social encounters and your exploration encounters, just watch the clock and make sure that they don't go longer than 30 minutes, ideally around 15 minutes, because they are typically less complicated than a combat encounter. So I think the goal for a 3-hour one-shot should be about 5 encounters. You could just plan and run 5 encounters in a row, but that kind of railroads your players into a set narrative. I like giving choices, and that's why I use a flowchart. This particular flowchart only requires you to prep 2 extra encounters, 7 encounters in total, and gives you 2 significant choice points. Of course, you can make your flowchart more simple than mine, or make it more complicated. But realize, even if you're prepping 8 encounters like this flowchart shows, you're only going to run 5 of them at the table. You're just providing more options for your players. Now, I'm going to show you how to take the Foul Stream adventure from the Dungeon Master's Guide and use it in one of these flowcharts. So the situation or setup is an alien fungus is in a cave polluting the stream that flows to the village of High Airy, and the fungus has spawned vile creatures in and around the cave. The hook, people of the village, are noticing fungal growths on the riverbanks and a layer of scum on the water. The characters either live in the village, and this is their source of water, or they've been contacted by the village and asked to investigate. So you can deliver that intro and hook to your players as a role-play encounter, and actually play a character from the village, asking them to explore the river and figure out what has gone wrong. Or you just start them at the river on their way with the mission in hand. The adventure outline spells out 6 encounters. First, a talking tree called a treant, strange twig creatures called blights, the corrupted cave that contains the source of the polluted river, large shrieking funguses, and bullywug frog people, a berserk brown bear, and a strange alien ooze that's responsible for all of this. So you could run all 6 of those encounters, one right after the other. However, you're probably not going to be able to fit 6 encounters into one evening's game. So what you can do is prepare all 6 of these encounters and then arrange them in a flowchart that gives your players choices. Here's how I would use that flowchart. So you give them the introduction, where you explain that the river has been corrupted by this vile fungus and this scum is poisoning the water. And then you give them the choice. Do they want to follow the winding river itself or take the road that parallels the river? Either way, they're going to get to the source of the river at the top of the mountain. But the choice is how are they going to get there. Now, if they take the river, this is where they encounter the blights, these strange twig creatures, and I would describe them more fungal than branches. I wouldn't even call them blights. I would just describe them as these weird little fungus creatures that attack and try to scratch at them, indicating that the fungus that's growing along the side of the river might actually be animating, and a big problem in the future if all of these mushrooms become like these ones that just attack them. Now, if the players choose to take the road instead, that's when they meet Borogrove, the kindly treant. This big talking tree is going to offer to help them because the tree wants, of course, the river to be cleansed from this sickening curse. This would definitely need to be a roleplay encounter because the treant is way too powerful for first level characters. The adventure also says that the treant gives them a magical acorn that has both properties of a healing potion and a lesser restoration spell. I personally would actually give 2 acorns, probably of different colors, one that has the healing potion effect and one that has the lesser restoration effect. Again, this provides players with choices as to how to use these effects and when, not just using them both at the same time. And before we reach the decision point of our flowchart, we're at the decision point of this video. And that's where you get to decide to give me a like or a subscribe or maybe a comment, maybe a share. It's up to you. All of them definitely help the channel. Thanks. So after the players encounter either the blights or the treant, they reach the caves. And on our flowchart, this is another decision point. You can simply give them the option of, do you want to enter the cave and go to the left, or do you want to enter the cave and go to the right? And then describe how the cave winds around until you get to whichever encounter they just chose by going left or right. Alternatively, you could break out the map and have them explore the map room by room. Now, the adventure tells you to ignore these 2 secret rooms on the map. I personally wouldn't, and we'll come back to that later. But if you use the map, then you get to decide which monsters are in which rooms in these caves, and if you have time, you could add more monsters. It's really up to you. But again, the goal here is to do a one-shot. So I say simply give them the choice of this way or that way, and that leads them to choosing either the bullywug encounter or the bear encounter. If they choose the bear route, they can have a combat encounter or a social encounter. The bear is aggressive and angry, but only because it is sick. And if they can figure that out, then they could use that acorn, they cast lesser restoration, make the bear feel better, and they could tame it. So again, you're giving players choices. These kind of small choices are important for a one-shot because you need a tight structure because of the time constraints of trying to do it all in one evening. But even these small choices help players have agency, and that's what's important in a role-playing game, is having creative options. So if the players don't choose the bear encounter, that leads them to the bullywug encounter, and that's where these frog people have a section of the caverns for their home. And they use these giant shrieker funguses as an alarm system to protect their home. So when the players approach these huge mushrooms, the mushrooms start to screech and let the bullywugs know they're there. Now the bullywugs are under the psychic effect of our alien ooze. And if you're playing with young children, you could reflect that by having these bullywugs with strange fungal growths on them. And when they drop to 0 hit points, don't describe them as killing the creatures, but instead describe these growths, these fungus growths being knocked off. And they are freed, liberated from the psychic control of our gray ooze. Now we're at the final battle with our psychic gray ooze. And I wouldn't necessarily call it that either. I would just refer to it as the strange alien that came out of a meteorite. And you can make up whatever story you want to explain the origin of this strange psychic ooze and why it is spreading this weird fungus and taking over the plant life and animal life. And if you're using the map, I would put the ooze here in the stream right by the secret rooms. Remember, I said we would come back to these secret rooms. I would wrap this with one final scene where there's a knock at the secret door. And the door opens slowly, and a dwarf pops his head out and says, "Is it safe to come out now?" And that dwarf, turns out he's an astronomer, and he saw the meteorite crash, brought it into his cave, and this secret area is where he lives. This allows you to do 2 things: explain how the ooze got here, and it gives you a connection for the next adventure, because the second level example adventure in the Dungeon Master's Guide has a dwarf NPC that sets up that story. So you could have this dwarf related to the other dwarf, and that connection sets up your next adventure. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. And thanks again for visiting the Dire Den. I'll see you next time.